Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's version of Ask Octopus. Today's session is going to be slightly different. Today we're going to be talking about some of our upcoming new features. As usual, I have Bob.
Hello.
And I have Ryan as well.
Hello.
Hey guys, thanks for that. So today I'm going to talk about our user, the largest requested feature on our user voice. This is composite step and inheritable templates. Okay, so first I'm going to address what is a step template. Step templates is something that's been about for quite some time. It's the ability to have a predefined template that are pre-configured and able to be reused in multiple projects. Next, what is a composite step template? So what you will find is we did go out and do an RFC. This is something that we've been talking about for quite some time. It did start in development, but didn't quite get there, unfortunately. So we're going to be working on that as a priority this year. So what is a composite step template? A composite step template it's going to be a way to have more than one step. So for instance, you may find that often you have to configure the same deployment process over and over again. Do you guys get that often?
Quite often. I have a customer who has, they told me they have over 1,000 projects, but they have probably, I think, 10 or 15 like root projects that they have, and then they just clone those projects over and over again, or template projects, and just clone those over and over again, just because it has the same general process. The way you deploy Kubernetes is going to be pretty much the same over and over again.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, I could even think like within our demo site, just some things that you would want to group together. Like at the beginning of OctoFX, there's like 4 steps related to making sure the database exists, that the database user exists, that it has permissions to the database. That we put those into a few different projects. So we could have one step that's just like configure your database that is composed of those other steps.
Yeah, see, that's it. It's and that's the thing is what you'll be able to do is with composite step templates is really drill down. So I mean, just firstly, I want to just make sure that what composite step templates is not. It's not fully fledged project templates. So it's not something that you're going to be able to have a pre-configured project, and then you're just going to have to you can reuse this over and over again. What it will do, though, is it might get you to less. Obviously, it will reduce the duplication of the work. And what you'll be able to do, so in your instance, Ryan, is actually one of the ones that I'm going to be discussing in just a moment, is, for instance, what you do have is, wait a sec, I'll just show you this, random quotes. So within your deployment process, obviously you guys use this just as much as I do, if not more. So you've got a whole bunch of SQL steps, and then you've got a whole bunch of, for the most part, so deployment steps. So it might be that, for instance, I often get customers who have to put all applications behind a load balancer, even when it's just a single application. There's some benefits there around security and just standardization. So what you've got here is this is our deployment process, and what you could do with composite step templates is break it into your SQL steps, for instance, and then also deploy your application using that same composite step template. But what it would look like is something where you would have your SQL bit, and that would be your step templates, and then you would have your application being deployed, and then at the bottom, I mean, let's be honest, how often are I almost every time after a deployment, I'll send an email or a Slack notification. Mm-hmm. Obviously, just wanted to, yeah. And that's a perfect example, right, of what a composite step template. You could just say, for instance, you could have it so that you email people and also send a Slack notification. That could be a notification composite step template. And these are going to be inheritable. This is one of the biggest bits that I like about it, is you can make a change at the top level, and then it's going to inherit, and it's going to come back down through all your projects, so that you only have to update that once. And that's something that I've done. I've been guilty of that in the past, where I build a deployment process, and obviously, now that I know the best practices, it doesn't happen as much. It doesn't, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but like that, like this deployment process would be able to, you could probably break it down to like the SQL bit, the application bit, and then the notification step. And if you need a change at the top level, that will be changed. What you like with one of the issues here is, if you want something that's editable, then that's not composite step templates. It's not something that can be changed. You can't reorder them. This is what you get. So what you would have to do is drop back to once you have it in place, you need to then change it. So but what you should be able to do is clone it and then make your adjustments. So if there is something that is slightly different, then you could just create an alternative step template for that. Oh, sorry, composite step template.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say we should, if you create a step template or composite step template that's going to email, send a Slack notification, send a team notification, then you probably should call it WOMF, after the office.
Yeah.
That's a deep cut there, Bob.
That's a really deep cut. Send a fax.
You guys.
Terrible joke. I apologize.
I'm sure everybody else will love it. So this is just our spec. This is roughly what it'll look like. It's similar to where you've got your composite, your step templates. You'll just be able to add composite. And this is the one that we're discussing. This is our really easy. You can ping the DevOps channel in Slack and also email Steve. It's always Steve. And then that's it really. And then you would have your parameters, just much like you would have your that in your step templates. So you'd have your parameter setting and then usages where you would be able to see it being used. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. If you do have any questions about it, then please just get in touch. I'll hand you over to Bob.
All right. So I'm going to talk to you guys today about our ops and maintenance processes. So I'm going to kind of define what the problem is and why we've kind of approached it and why we're trying to solve it. So let me click on this. Oops. All right. So
Spoilers.
Yeah, it's just spoilers. So this is my personal Octopus Cloud instance that I've configured. And when we were working on Spaces, specifically when we were testing out Spaces, our engineers, they were releasing a new version every night. And I got tired of having to upgrade my HA server because those are just a very manual process, having to upgrade it every single day. So I was like, well, I need to automate this. So what I did is I created a custom environment called maintenance. And then I created a custom lifecycle called maintenance only. And that's all it's doing is it's just going to run inside here. And then it goes through here and it checks for the new MSI. Then it does the necessary steps, puts it into maintenance mode, trains the nodes, backs up the database, does all the good stuff that I wanted to do. So that's great. And this is monitoring a hot folder. And so what I have it set up to do is I have a trigger that's configured, runs every 5 minutes, runs all day, and it creates and deploys a new release. So if you look at my overview, you can see that I'm up to 22,252 releases so far. I have in my life cycle, I have it really set pretty strict in terms of my my retention policy. So I only keep the most two recent releases, but I still have to go through all that work. And it's not really a deployment per se. It's just something I needed to do for me. And I also have to create a custom environment, which is kind of a bit of a bummer. Have you guys kind of run into this? Have you tried to use Octopus Deploy to not do deployments really?
I use Octopus to do like everything. It's like, oh, like how can I figure out, like script console was like a big thing. It's like, oh, I can run scripts now. But just, yeah, I remember I set up a project to go through each of our environments and just run Windows updates. So like a PowerShell command to run Windows updates and schedule a restart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've done that myself. I've used it to do Windows updates. Use it so you can similar to what I just showed there with the rolling deployments. Just update with a deployment. It's like a case of run updates and then remove it from the load balancer and so forth. So
yeah, and it makes sense to use Octopus Deploy in those cases because we have access to the environments, and it's been like the install has been approved, and we know we know the secrets and everything like that. So to do the appropriate connection. So like, for example, to back up the database, I know it knows that, hey, this is the database I need to connect to. This is the username. This is the password. And so it knows all that type of information for me. So it's a really good place to put this type of, to do this type of work and to set something like this up. So I'm going to kind of walk you through our spec document a little bit. And again, just like everything else, it's probably going to change as we get into it a little bit more. But there's a couple big things. So we're not really going to have snapshots, so to speak, and we're not really going to be creating releases with operations processes or dev processes, whatever you want to end up wanting to call it. But what it'll do is it'll just allow you to basically I want to run this set of work on this particular environment. You will notice and that we'll have some sort of ability to undo those changes. So a copy of the process will be automatically stored when an execution takes place. So that way we can roll back if we need to roll back. But it's not as needed as, say, a development or a deployment snapshot, because, again, the chances are you're going to be running these in a very specific environment. So I'm going to run this always in production, or I'm always going to run this in staging. And I don't need to know about the packages that I have to deploy out. I'm not have to worry about artifacts or anything along those lines. And they'll just sit right next to inside of your project. So you'll see now, instead of just process, you'll have process deployment and process maintenance. And so the reason we include it inside of a project is because chances are you're probably going to have to run maintenance processes on a project. So a perfect use case that they use later down in the spec document is have the ability to go in and run something like, hey, I want to run just a quick, simple test, just a health check. I want to make sure my service is always running. And if it's not, then I want to then kick off another thing. So that brings kind of up the next bit is how to schedule some triggers. So we're going to have the ability to basically trigger these maintenance processes based on certain things. So a health ping, or I think we've talked about doing it in machine policy, like health checks. So if a health check were to fail, then you could kick off a maintenance process or deployment a maintenance process like this. Some of the common examples that we're thinking of that would really leverage this is obviously upgrading Octopus Deploy. I have two instances set up. I have my local HA instance and I have the cloud instance, and the cloud instance upgrades my HA instance. Automatically backing up a database, disaster recovery. If we need a failover to do a disaster recovery, take an application offline for like maintenance mode, updating configuration files for like a new SMTP server comes online. Well, in the past, you'd have to do a whole new deployment for that. And that's a bit much if all you want to do is update a small configuration entry. Maybe refreshing your certificates, like installing new certificates on the machines or anything along those lines. Can you guys kind of think of anything else that we could kind of leverage this for?
To be honest, I just love the fact that you're backing up SQL with it. That is really key, I think. I saw a bunch where people just don't back it up. Then you have to raise it with, it may well be a sysadmin or a DBA. And just the fact that it's within Octopus just by itself, I think that's great. It just takes that worry, and you've got it. And there's, that's what the thing I like about it as well is it can also be an additional step. It doesn't have to be, your standard DBA backups, etc. It's a standalone thing. You've got something to roll back to if you absolutely need to as well. So I just think that's so useful doing a SQL backup just alone.
Yeah, I could think of maybe just some common diagnostic troubleshooting scripts that like an operations team would run against maybe a server to maybe troubleshoot some DNS problems or see what's going on with the machine. You could add those in as a maintenance or an operations process, and then you have a way to run it that doesn't involve RDPing into the machine. It doesn't involve there's a log of it actually being run. So you can say, yes, I did check that. I checked it on this machine. Like it kind of gives you a record of those things you were doing. So I don't know if that's necessarily one of the use cases that was envisioned for it, but I can see it being like a useful one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And one of the reasons I like running these things through Octopus as opposed to, say, I used to have scheduled tasks that would handle my backup to Azure or backup to my NAS drive. But it's a scheduled task running on a Windows machine. I didn't have any visibility into that at all. And so it kind of drove me nuts because I didn't know that I had a backup failing for a couple of weeks until I logged in and I go, oh my gosh, that's not working at all. Same thing with now with the SQL Server, the database backups, they have the they have the log and everything like that. And you can set up notifications if a job fails, but again, you don't have that singular visibility where everyone can see the status of these various processes. Okay, I am going to hand it over to Ryan, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about environment templates after I spoiled that at the beginning.
Yeah, environment templates. So this is another one of the big features. So a few of these that we talked about, maintenance processes and now environment templates, were actually mentioned in the newsletter that went out a few weeks ago. So this is another one that we're going to be working on, looking at this year. It does have an existing spec that I'm going to pull a lot of information from. And I'm just going to kind of jump into that and talk about what they are and what problems they solve. So if I jump over to the spec, one of the two common scenarios is you want to have environments that you deploy to, like maybe for each feature branch, or maybe you want a test or QA environment for each member of your team, or maybe each tester on your team. And right now, there's not a dynamic way of doing that. There are a lot of ways you can implement that. Anybody who's watched any of the videos previously knows I'm about to mention tenants for both of these. So, but that still involves you going in and creating a tenant and connecting it to the environments, manipulating the life cycle, and then adding the targets. All of those things can be scripted. I know people who have scripted those things for, like, oh, when a new branch is detected, we're going to make these API calls from our build server to create the infrastructure in Octopus. But this environment template sets out to build that into the product itself. And actually, we have a pretty good reason to use it on our demo site. So something we have is, because we're not doing demos and we're not, doing testing, 24/7, we have these jobs under the demo infrastructure project on our demo site that goes through and spins up and spins down our infrastructure, every morning and every night. So we could also replace, like, a lot of this work. Right now, these are just projects that are calling out to Azure templates, ARM templates, CloudFormation, whichever ones they're using. We could create environment templates that would define what those provisioning steps are, and then you could just say, hey, whenever I deploy to OctoFX, spin up the environment if it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. If I haven't deployed in the last 8 hours, or if it's a certain time at night, some trigger, go and deprovision it. And what that looks like from our mock-up, I can zoom in a little bit here, is kind of like, almost like it looks like a process. It looks almost like a step template, because you have things like parameters that you could provide at, spin up time. You can provide triggers like, hey, I want to automatically provision this environment when a certain life cycle phase is reached, or maybe there's no triggers, like we always manually spin these up. And then, kind of similar to these conversations we've had around operations processes, step template or composite step templates, they actually have a process built into the template for, when I create this, run these steps. So create a resource group in Azure, run this template that's going to create my targets and register them, go notify Slack, go send an email, let people know this environment it has been created. And then this, at the same time, there's a deprovisioning process.
That's really nice, because right now, when I put together that infrastructure as code on our demo site, I had to have steps that only ran in the spin up environment, is what I call it, which is the provisioning environment. And then I had to have other steps that only ran in the teardown environment, and it had to be part of the same process. So if you look at it, it's kind of hard to piece those bits together. So being able to define separate steps like that, that's really nice.
Yeah, and there's like some good use cases for this. So, like, maybe you have transient QA environments. You want to test it in a QA environment before it goes to pre-prod, but you don't need that QA environment to stay around forever. So you can just, when we deploy to QA, spin up a new environment using these templates, do your testing, and whenever we promote it to pre-prod, we don't need QA anymore. Tear it down, delete it, release those resources, avoid charging.
Well, that's it. That also reduces the cost, and testing can be such a massive overhead pricing-wise. This is what I find. I think this is going to be awesome. If Tom the tester comes along, and he just wants to test a particular bug. You've already got it there. It just provisions infrastructure, does your deployments. And I think as well, it's also going to cut down where, for instance, if you were manually provisioning the infrastructure, people might be going in and doing different things. And it really standardizes that. And I imagine any sort of drift would be detected much, much quicker here. That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I remember one of my teams, we had a dozen or so like dev environments, and they were all statically built into Octopus. Like, we didn't do anything fancy like calling the API to build them out. They also weren't like provisioned automatically. They weren't in the cloud. They were just kind of the servers we had around. But we had more than 12 developers. So there was like this whole administrative task that we had to do around like, well, this team has this dev environment for this amount of time. And okay, well, which feature branches on that environment? Well, we got to go talk to the team. Where if you could like build that into, say, maybe the environment name has the team name or the tester name or the branch name that it was generated for, well, you can read it and see it automatically. You're not limited to a specific number. Like if you have, 6 teams, but 3 static environments, well, you don't have to go create 3 more and move them around. You can let all of that happen dynamically if that's a setup that you would need.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really nice value add on terms of how you want to provision this dynamically. That's really cool.
Yeah, there were some mock-ups about how that would play into the life cycle. Instead of adding environments directly in, there would be like, hey, connect an environment template to this, which is nice because then you could have, in our case, we maybe only have that one template that goes across the entire project. Maybe we have the OctoFX template that can be used in dev, QA, pre-prod, and production just for our spin up of the demo. But you could also have a different one for each phase. So your dev phase could have a different environment or a different template than your QA phase. Maybe dev, you won't, web server and database, same machine, no problem. But QA, you want to split them out. Pre-prod, you want it to look exactly like production. So you can actually use different templates for each phase of the life cycle.
And you can go pretty I imagine you'd be able to go pretty crazy with the with those steps. So like if you wanted to do something that's like, hey, I want to take a copy of a most recent backup that we have from prod, restore that, and then runs a bunch of data sanitation scripts because you need to, because GDPR and everything like that. That'll all be automated, but then they'll get a fresh copy of the data that they can actually test with and verify that, hey, it is working.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see if you would build that directly into the environment template, or if that would be, it makes sense that would be in the provisioning process. Like after I spin everything up, run these steps to like configure the site. But also that's part of an operations process for the project that gets triggered whenever new machines come online or a new environment comes online. So,
that's good. That's a good point.
I love how all of them sort of tie in to really just kind of work together to make the whole, the whole process better for everybody.
Yeah, I like the fact that it's funny because all the stuff that we've been talking about you can do in Octopus Deploy right now. It's just it's not a great user experience, and this is just making things just so much better, I think.
Yeah, it's just pulling it more to the forefront, I think, which is awesome.
Yeah, I'd say like especially anybody who's interested in this, definitely, and we'll put links to all the specs for these in the video notes. Because like the spec actually goes into a lot of detail. There's already been a lot of thought put into this, and as the team picks this up, throughout the year, there's going to be a lot more thought. There's been changes to the product that since the spec has been written. So how does that affect our operations processes? May come out first, and how does operations process affect the provisioning process? So I'm really interested to see how this comes together as the team picks it up. But the specs already got a lot of good information. There's a lot of things that I didn't think about, like capturing the results of provisioning. So you spin up all these machines. Maybe you've got Linux targets. Now you need some SSH accounts stored in Octopus so that you can actually do your deployment. So similar to output variables, but they even talk about adding new functions like, hey, let's add a new account. Versus like an output variable and an artifact. Well, we need to generate an account or generate a target based off the results of that provisioning process.
Very nice.
So that was an interesting idea, and they go into you can kind of see here a whole lot of detail about what those things look like, what it looks like to manually provision or deprovision. I've already shown the life cycles a little bit, but and it talks about tenants and project variables and scoping all towards the end. So really interesting idea. I know I've talked to several customers that would be highly interested in this specifically for the feature branch, like being able to generate new environments based on feature branches that they've built and have pushed packages for.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that
Yeah, I
is
can think of a few customers like that as well. So yeah, it's one of those things I don't think you realize you need it until you see that, oh, I have been missing that.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. It's like whenever we hear about what the things that are coming down the pipeline from the roadmap, it's like, yeah, I can think of several uses of that. I can think of ways that I use Octopus that would have been benefited from operations processes or composite step templates or environment templates. Like I would have used all three of these.
Oh yeah.
I would definitely be using more SQL backups, that's for sure. Everybody all of the time with the SQL backups.
Yeah. All right. So that's environment templates. And that's the end of our little bit different episode this week. So we're talking about things coming down instead of answering questions, but we'll get back to answering your questions on the next episode. And speaking of your questions, if you have questions, you can submit them. We have this URL, hello.octopus.com/askoctopus that you can go to. Feel free to email us at support@octopus or join us on Slack to share your questions, share your feedback on these features, the questions we asked in previous episodes. But as always, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.